Hi everybody, I'm Bia, and welcome back to Credit Graded for Teens. For those of you who don't know, Credit Graded for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritist teachings and topics in a way that makes more sense to us and is more relatable to us as teenagers in today's society. We've been reading through the Gospel according to Spiritism together, and within this, last week we left off on a section of chapter 1 that's titled Instruction from the Spirits. And so we were on the last instruction from the spirits, so that's where we'll pick up today. St. Augustine is one of the greatest popularizers of Spiritism. He has manifested himself in almost every part. The reason for this is to be found in the life story of the great Christian philosopher. He belongs to a vigorous flax, known as Father of Church, to whom Christianity owes its most solid basis. Like many others, he was uprooted from paganism, or rather, from the most profound godliness, by the splendor of the truth. When suddenly, in the middle of his dissipation, he felt a strange vibration in his soul that called him to himself, and made him understand that happiness was not to be found in deliberating and escapist pleasures. Finally, he too had a similar experience to Paul, who heard saintly voices calling to him on the road to Damascus, saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" When St. Augustine heard this voice, he exclaimed, dear God, forgive me. I believe. I am a Christian." From this moment on, he became one of the greatest supporters of the gospel. You may read the notable confessions left by this eminent spirit, the character and prophetic words he uttered after the death of Saint Monica. "I am convinced that my mother will visit me and give me advice, revealing to me what awaits for us in the future life." What great teaching in these words! What resound foresight of the doctrine that was to come! This is the reason why today we see that the time has come to spread the truth as he predicted. He has become its ardent dismenter, and, as it were, multiplied himself in order to be able to reply to all to whom called him. Aratus, the disciple of St. Paul, Paris, 1863. So here they gave a little background history to St. Augustine and said that St. Augustine, he grew up paganism, right? So he believed in multiple gods and gods that didn't really make sense to how we understand God today. So he grew up in paganism, and then he said suddenly, out of the nowhere, he felt this vibration in his soul, that was telling him, this is not how we find happiness. We don't find happiness through these, earthly pleasures. And from that feeling within his soul, he came to the realization that, who God really is. And they say he exclaimed, dear God, forgive me. I believe. I am a Christian." So it was kind of that feeling, that overwhelmed him, that helped him to understand. And when he had this realization, it completely transformed his life. Not only now he was okay, I'm a Christian. No, he went to devote it and to spread it to people, and became one of the greatest supporters of Christ and the gospel. And then he said that once his mother passed away, he said, "I'm gonna wait for her to give me advice and to reveal what awaits for me in the future." And that kind of already shows these hints at Spiritism, right? Because yes, he was sad that his mother passed away, but he knew she was gonna come and she was gonna say what's after, because there is something after, right? So, and she's gonna come in that spirit state. So we see that beginning of Spiritism. And they say what resound foresight of the doctrine that was to come, right? So he was foreshadowing what this doctrine that was to come, the Spiritism doctrine. And again, it's just saying how he took once he had this like feeling, this revelation, he took it and tried to spread Spiritism everywhere and became really a devoted follower and teacher, right? And spread it everywhere. And now there's another note on the bottom. Would it be possible for St. Augustine to demolish what he himself had built? Certainly not. But just as many others before him, he now sees with the eyes of spirit what he could not see while he was a man. In freedom, his soul sees new brightness and understanding, what previously had been impossible to understand. New ideas have revealed to him the true meaning of certain words. On earth, he judged things according to the knowledge he possessed at the time. But ever since he saw the new light, he can appreciate those words more judiciously. Thus, he had to revise his beliefs regarding incubus and succubus spirits, as well as the condemnation that he had launched against the theory of the antipodes. Now that he can see Christianity and its points, he thinks differently from when he was alive, which in no way prohibits him from continuing to be a Christian apostle. He may even establish himself as a dissenter of Spiritism without renouncing his faith, because he has seen that which was forecast to come to pass. Therefore, by proclaiming this doctrine today, he only leads us towards a more correct and logical interpretation of the text. The same also occurs with other spirits who find themselves in similar positions. So here they're saying that, okay, he wasn't perfect, and he wasn't perfectly aligned to Spiritism because he wasn't, yes, he was great in spreading Jesus' words, right, and became a great supporter of the gospel, but that doesn't mean he had all the knowledge, right? So, yeah, sometimes he made mistakes in his, like in his corporeal life. He made mistakes. He might have said something that was different, but now they're saying now that he's in the spirit world, he's learned a lot more. And these little mistakes that he made, like maybe in things that he said, he fixed them, and he's truly understanding and opening up. So like they're saying, so now as a spirit, even if he said, like, the spirits are telling us maybe he said some things that were incorrect in his time, but now as a spirit he's really learned and improved and now knows better. And they're saying this is the same situation for many spirits who are dedicated to spreading Jesus' words and even Spiritism, but they might have not been perfect in their corporeal life. But that's okay, they're saying, because they go into the spirit world and they do learn those little mistakes that they made. And now we're on to chapter 2 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. And this chapter is titled, My Kingdom is Not of This World. And then the sections are the future life, the regality of Jesus, a point of view, instruction from the spirits, and earthly regality. So the first point that it puts is gonna get this title and see where it comes from. Flight then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus replied, My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest from the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place. Then Flight said, So you are a king, Jesus answered. Jesus answered, You say that I am a king. For this reason I was born, and for this reason I came into the world to testify the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. John 18:33, 36, and 37. So at the bottom, just to re-clarify this, that in the Bible, Jesus never wrote down any of his own teachings, but he had his disciples and other people who would write down all his, write down things that he said, his teachings. So when they get text like this is Jesus who said it, but this is, like, when it says John at the end, it was John who wrote this down, and it's in the section 18 and in, like, chapter 18, section 33, 36, and 37 of what John wrote. So that's how it just makes it easier to find it with those, with that type of citation. But so here we see in this quote, he said, when Jesus was being like condemned as being and like arrested as being the king of the Jews, he said, no, I'm my kingdom, right? I'm the king. My kingdom is not of this world. So we already see this traced back to Spiritism, back to like a heaven or something, right? People understand that there's something else besides just this corporeal world, because he's saying my kingdom is not of this world, so there has to be something else, right? So the first section is the future life. With these words, Jesus clearly referred to a future life, which he presents in all circumstances as the goal to be reached by humanity, and which should constitute man's greatest preoccupation here on earth. All of his maxims refer to this great principle. Indeed, without a future life, there would be no reason to have the majority of these moral perceptions. This is why those who do not believe in future life cannot understand or think the matter foolish, because they imagine that Jesus was only speaking of the present life. So they're saying again, here it shows that he's referring to a future life, right? He's referring to something else, because his kingdom's not of this world, so it has to be of something else. And he's saying that, they're saying here that a lot of Jesus' teachings refer back to this future life, right? Because if Jesus coming telling us, okay, we need to do all these things, we can't accomplish that all in one life, because we're not perfect, right? So everything he's saying kind of relates to a future life. And people who don't believe in this future life, then they get confused with like Jesus' teaching, because they say, okay, how can this be true, right? And then they think it's crazy. But if we think of what he brought us in terms of like there's a future life after, to keep working on it and keep making that progress and keep getting better, then it starts making a lot more sense. Not only to us spiritists, but even to other people who don't know this, it makes more sense than, oh, I have one life to do everything, and then it's rather heaven or hell, or we can keep going and progressing. So it kind of makes it much more understandable and believable in those terms when we understand that he's referring to a future life. This tenet can be considered as the basis of Christ's teachings. Therefore, it has been placed as the first item in this work. It must be the point to be most closely looked at, as it is the only one that justifies the anomalies and irregularities of earthly life, and also shows itself to be in accordance with the justice of God. So, they're saying that this can be considered the basis of Jesus' teaching. So with everything Jesus is teaching, he's referring to a future life. He's referring to more out there. And with the future life, also previous, right? So that's like the basis, that this is not the only existence, this is not the only planet, this is not the only world. We have to get that basis, because when we get that basis, we can understand things better. We understand why there's inequality, because yeah, we were created equal, but based on the decisions everyone made, now they're at a state of inequality, right? Because of what we have to go through for a certain reason. And we understand why some things on Earth happen the way they happen, because there's a past history, right? There's a past history that's saying, oh, okay, now this has to happen because for these people to learn this. So God is being just, right? God created us simple and ignorant. And now, as we've been going through, we have been making our own choices, and when we make the wrong choice, then we're going to suffer that consequence, and we're going to have to repay for that so we can continue. So then, when we have this idea of future and previous and everything that's just not this one earthly life, right? This earthly life is important for us to do as much as we can, but we need to remember that there's more to it. And when we think of it as that, as a big picture, that there's more to it, there's future, there's previous, there's other worlds, then it makes so much more sense why there's inequality, why there's irregularities, why is God just if people are unequal, right? But this makes it much clearer. The Jews had only very vague ideas regarding a future life. They believed in angels, whom they considered to be privileged beings of the creation. They did not know, however, that men and women could one day become angels and so participate in the same happiness. According to them, the observance of God's laws would bring worldly recompensation, the supremacy of their nation, and victory over their enemies. The public calamity and downfalls were a punishment for disobedience of the law. Moses could say no more than this to those who were mostly shepherds or ignorant people who needed to be touched before anything else by worldly things. Later, Jesus revealed that there exists another world where God's justice follows its course. This is the world he promised to all those who obey the commandments of God and the good find recompensation. This is his kingdom, where he will be found in all his glory, and to which he returned when he left earth. So, the Jews at that time, they had vague ideas of a future life, right? So they weren't completely, like, canceling that idea out, but it was only like there was angels. And the angels, those were just special chosen, specially created. It wasn't that they didn't understand that we, men and women, can get to that state of being those angels, being those guardian spirits, right? Because they say angels, and we know those are highly evolved spirits. Those are the guardian spirits, or mentor spirits. It just was a different word with angels. But so they believed in these angels, but they thought they were just like privileged, right? And that we wouldn't get there. We wouldn't be like that. That was just those angels were just lucky enough to be chosen and created that way. So we see that we now understand that we all can get there, right? And that's why we want to follow Jesus' teachings and God's laws, because we want to get to that point that we can be the angels, right? We can be the perfect spirits. And then they thought that when they were all observing God's laws, right, and practicing God's laws, they would all be recompensated. And when someone did something that was against God's laws, then something bad would happen. Like they would have downfalls or something as a punishment. But, and they're saying, so Moses couldn't really tell them because they were so materialistic and so ignorant still, and not advanced. So Moses couldn't just tell them, oh no, like, this is going to be like many lives, right? It takes time, like we were saying, for them to work up to these ideas. So they needed basic ideas. So they could only think kind of in ideas of this one existence that we're in right now, this one world. But that's why now Jesus came, and then Spiritism is coming to show us more of this. As we're getting more involved, now we can understand more of this. And they're saying, but later, so Moses didn't really express this because those people wouldn't have understood it or accepted it. But then Jesus came and also said that his world, right, is where people are going to be, the good are going to be recompensated, right? And it'll be his kingdom and all his glory, and that's where he returned to after he left earth, right? It didn't say he died, he said where he's returning to after earth. And showed all these like more levels of different worlds and existences. But then Spiritism is coming along, because even just with Jesus' words, people couldn't quite understand the true meaning. And then Spiritism comes and kind of guides it even further to, okay, he went to a highly evolved world. However, when adapting his teachings to the conditions of humanity at that time, Jesus did not consider it convenient to give them all the truth, for he saw they would only be dazzled by it and unable to understand. So he limited himself, in a manner of speaking, to the presentation of a future life, as a principle, as a natural law, whose action no one could escape. Therefore, every Christian firmly believed in a future life, but the idea that many hold is still vague, incomplete, and because of this, quite false on various points. For the majority of people, it is nothing more than a belief, void of absolute certainty. So this is why there are doubts and even incredulity. So here again, so Jesus started to introduce this idea of more worlds and more to it than just this life, but he saw that if he started explaining everything, oh yeah, there's different worlds that are different levels of evolution that people go to, reincarnation, like if he started going to all these things, the people, they would be dazzled, right? They would be like a deer in headlights. They wouldn't be understanding anything. They would just be like staring and shocked. So they weren't going to be able to understand. So there was no point in him expressing all these ideas at that time. So he didn't, and then he only gave this vague description just to give like a little taste of it. And so that's why many today still have vague ideas. They're not really sure, or they have incomplete ideas. They can't follow that idea all the way through. And then because of these things, because they have vague and incomplete ideas, then they kind of distort them, and then we have some false points within these things. So that's why for the majority of people, there's this disconnect from the truth and what they believe, just because it was vague in nature. But now Spiritism is coming to say, okay, now you are capable of understanding a little bit more, like here's some more truth, right? Spiritism has come to complete this point, as well as many others touched on by the teachings of Christ, now that man is more sufficiently mature to be able to learn the truth. With Spiritism, a future life is no longer an article of faith, a mere hypothesis. It becomes a material reality, as fact demonstrates, because those who have described it to us have all been eyewitnesses. So not only is doubt no longer possible, but also anyone of whatever intelligence is able to get an idea of its many varied aspects. In the same way, we can imagine what a country we have never visited is like by reading a detailed description of it. But this description of the future life is circumstated to such an extent and the conditions of existence for those who reside there, be they happy or unhappy, are so rational, that we are bound to agree that it could not be otherwise. It patently represents the true justice of God. So here they're saying that point again, that this is what Spiritism has come to complete this point. So Jesus left this point because people couldn't understand, so he left it kind of vague. Spiritism coming to clarify it and saying, okay, now you're a little smarter, now you're more intelligent, you can understand this. You can start to understand it, so here's more information. And so now it's out there. Now this, like Spiritism, it's making sense, and it makes Jesus' teachings click more. And then you start saying, okay, I understand. And they're saying that these, it's so, and it's saying, it doesn't mean that you don't have to know about it to learn about it, kind of thing. So, like, you don't have to have gone to the spirit world and remembered it to learn about the spirit world, because think about a country you've never been to. Think about Australia right now. If you haven't been to Australia, can you still imagine what it would be like? Because I have an image of what it would be like just by reading things about it, right? If someone gave you a description, you could be like, oh, that's this place, or that's this place. Like, have you ever been to a desert? No, but you can imagine just by knowing the description of it. So it's the same thing. We don't need to remember having been in the spirit world to be able to learn about it. And they're saying it's so kind of clear cut, these definitions and these things that we're getting, that, and they're so rational. So there's really no way to go against them once you're truly reading it and interpreting correctly. You'll see the reason, right? The everything's very rational and makes sense. And maybe people who don't believe in Spiritism or don't agree with it have not been able to have that rational thinking click in their head. But so that's why we can't force people to believe in Spiritism, right? But once they understand that rational point of view and that rational thinking and these rational arguments per se, that's when they'll be able to believe Spiritism on their own. And so this represents the true justice of God, right? Now we truly understand why there's inequalities and how God is just with all these inequalities. So that's where we'll leave off today, and next week we'll continue on the next section of chapter 2. I know this is a lot of information, so if you guys have any questions or comments, anything you want me to clarify more, feel free to email me at kardecradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you right away. Before we leave off, I'd like to read our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations by Linda Picone for today's day, May 14th. What we do. Where I was born and where and how I have lived is unimportant. It should be what I have done with where I have been that should be of interest. Some people we know are always telling new acquaintances where they were born, where they went to college, where they live now, as if these things were evident of their importance. But what have they really done? A degree from the most prestigious university doesn't make anyone a success. Being born into a family of accomplishment may be an advantage, but it does not guarantee success. If I'm tempted to try and impress someone with my personal background, I'll stop and ask myself why I think it matters. Instead of trying to impress with my history, I will try to let people know who I am and what I stand for now. With that, again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email me at kardecradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you right away. I'm Bia, and this has been Kardec Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening. This has been Kardec Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.